Welcome to Life Stories, where real experiences meet profound lessons. Today, we share a journey of courage, betrayal, and redemption. This is the story of a woman who, after years of compromising her career and independence for her husband's family, decides to take a stand. As secrets unfold, she must confront the deep-rooted corruption of the powerful Donovan family, leading to a life-changing decision that will impact not only her marriage but the future of everyone involved. Join us as we dive into a story about reclaiming one's truth, power, and the pursuit of justice. Be sure to subscribe to start the story today. I sat at the polished table of a prestigious restaurant, an establishment that exuded old-world charm, elegance, and power, the kind of place where the very air seemed thick with the weight of the rich and influential. It was a far cry from the world I had once imagined for myself, one of code and technology, where lines of programming could solve real-world problems and make a meaningful difference. But now, as I looked at my bank app with trembling hands, all I could see was a stark notification that made my stomach churn. Card declined. Ryan, my husband of 3 years, sat across from me, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of triumph and quiet satisfaction. He casually sipped his Bordeaux, his lips curling into the faintest smirk as if he had orchestrated this entire moment. Next to him, his parents, the esteemed Dr. William and Mrs. Evelyn Donovan, watched me with barely concealed delight. It was as though they'd been waiting for this very moment to happen. The moment when I would finally break, when I would have no choice but to surrender to their world. This wasn't just about money, or a simple dinner with in-laws. This was about power, control, and the crushing weight of an ideal that had always felt foreign to me. The notion that I should leave behind everything I had worked so hard for to embrace the role of the dutiful wife. The woman who hosted charity galas, served on boards, and helped Ryan's family look polished and perfect. The woman who didn't code, who didn't lead teams. I had known from the beginning that something was amiss that evening. Ryan had insisted on coming to this particular restaurant, Le Chardon, a place where he had proposed to me 4 years ago. Back then, I was a fresh graduate from MIT, a budding software developer with my whole career ahead of me. I was the one being celebrated that night. Ryan was proud of me then, proud of what I was accomplishing on my own. But things had changed. Slowly, imperceptibly, Ryan had begun to slip into the role of the obedient son, carrying out his family's wishes without question. And I had become something of an inconvenience to them. Maybe you should try another card, Evelyn said, her voice syrupy with false concern. She adjusted her diamond necklace, a gesture I knew too well. It was a subtle signal that she was enjoying herself, enjoying this little game of power, this moment of victory over me. My pulse quickened. I could already feel the discomfort of the situation deep in my chest. But I knew what would happen. I pulled out my second card, a card Ryan didn't know about, and handed it to the waiter. He swiped it. The same result. Declined. The game was rigged. The humiliation deliberate. Ryan had planned this carefully. The public nature of the act, the timing of the family's presence, and the subtle cruelty of it all. It was his way of punishing me for standing my ground, for refusing to step into the role they envisioned for me. It wasn't enough for him that I was thriving in my career. He wanted me to walk away from everything I had built and join his family's foundation. The foundation that, as I would soon discover, was more about image and control than any actual good. This is what happens when you insist on being unreasonable, Ryan said quietly, his voice low, as he slid his credit card across the table. I could see the arrogance in his eyes, the sense of superiority that had started to creep in ever since his promotion as CEO of his family's tech company. We talked about this, Sarah. The foundation position would be perfect for you. It's more appropriate for someone in our social circle, more fitting for a Donovan wife. His words stung more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just the insult to my career. It was the realization that the man I had married, the man I had once admired and respected, was slowly becoming someone I barely recognized. The James the First had met at MIT was brilliant, passionate, and kind. Someone who cared about truth, integrity, and making a difference. But this version of James, sitting across from me, was a man willing to sell out his values, willing to cast aside everything he once believed in for the sake of family loyalty and image. I pushed his card back toward him, my voice steady despite the anger and hurt that roiled within me. No, James. I won't be needing that. I reached into my clutch and pulled out something I had been carrying for weeks. Ever since I had first sensed the shift in our marriage. A single credit card. A backup plan. One James didn't know about. Connected to an account he couldn't touch. Evelyn's eyes narrowed as I handed it to the waiter, who was now hovering awkwardly at the edge of our table. What's this? She demanded, her hand gripping her wineglass a little too tightly. The faint tremor in her fingers didn't escape my notice. Ryan's gaze met mine, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of confusion. A crack in the facade he had carefully constructed. I couldn't help myself. Did you really think I wouldn't have a backup plan? Did you really think I wouldn't protect myself? After watching what happened to Lauren? The mention of Lauren, Ryan's first wife, caused a stir. The silence that followed was palpable, but it was broken by Evelyn's sharp intake of breath and Ryan's stiffening posture. Ryan's family had destroyed Lauren financially, burying her in legal battles and limiting her access to the wealth she was entitled to. Lauren had become a cautionary tale, a warning to me about the price of defying the Donovans. James's eyes were dark with anger as he leaned forward. Sarah, he said, his voice low and threatening. This isn't the place. But I wasn't done. No, this wasn't just about the credit cards or the family's expectations. This was bigger than that. This was about me reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my right to choose my own path. I met his gaze, not breaking it. Actually, James, this is exactly the place you chose. You wanted an audience, didn't you? Fine, let's give them one. Let's tell them how you and your family have been pressuring me to give up my career. How you've been pushing me to walk away from everything I've worked for, everything I've built, just to fit your outdated, narrow view of what a wife should be. The waiter, who had just returned with my credit card, quickly retreated. Other diners in the restaurant were beginning to notice the tension at our table. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly nervous now that the conversation was gaining unwanted attention. But I didn't care. For the first time in months, I felt a surge of strength that had been buried under years of subtle manipulation, emotional games, and control. I had been waiting for this moment. The moment when I would stand up for myself. When I would reclaim my identity. I wasn't just Ryan's wife. I wasn't just the woman his family had wanted me to be. I was someone with my own voice, my own career, and my own power. And for the first time in a long while, I realized I wasn't alone in this fight. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with unspoken words. Ryan's fingers curled into fists on the table, the muscles in his jaw tightening in a way that told me he was no longer just angry, he was afraid. But not of me. He was afraid of what this confrontation might do to his perfect world. His carefully crafted image of success. His family had always operated in the shadows, using their wealth and influence to control everyone around them. And I had been one of those people. Until now. Evelyn's face was pale, the high society mask she always wore slipping for a moment. For the first time, I saw her not as the untouchable matriarch but as a woman who was trying desperately to hold on to the pieces of her crumbling empire. Richard, sitting beside her, had grown increasingly agitated. His disapproving frown was more pronounced than ever, his sharp features betraying the true depths of his distaste. They were the ones who had spent years trying to control me, trying to bend me to their will. But now, it was my turn. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me any longer. I could feel the weight of their gaze on me as I calmly set my backup credit card on the table. I had kept it hidden for months, ever since I'd first suspected that something wasn't quite right with Ryan's family. My instincts had always been sharp, and after watching Lauren's life unravel, I had known I needed to protect myself. It wasn't about being distrustful, it was about being realistic. Ryan had been changing, little by little, and I could see the subtle shifts in his behavior. His loyalty had been shifting from me to his family, and I knew that when it came down to it, they would stop at nothing to control me. I kept my voice steady, though inside I felt a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, A deep sadness that the man I had once loved was no longer the man sitting before me. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I asked quietly, my eyes locked on his. That I wouldn't notice the inconsistencies? The irregularities in your family's finances? The pattern of transactions that didn't make sense? Ryan's face grew more ashen with each passing second, his shock evident. I could see the panic in his eyes. But I wasn't done. I leaned back slightly, maintaining control. It was a role I had come to play well over the years, calm, composed, and steady in the face of chaos. But beneath that calm exterior, I was a woman who had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let everything slip away because of the family's greed. I wasn't just going to sit here and pretend that I hadn't seen the signs. I continued, my voice growing slightly firmer. You think I wouldn't have noticed the discrepancies when I reviewed the foundation's financial records last month? When I found a $7 million donation supposedly earmarked for educational initiatives in developing countries. Initiatives that, by the way, don't even exist? Richard's hand clenched around his wineglass, his knuckles turning white. His attempts at calmness were wearing thin, and the facade of control he had carefully built around himself was beginning to crack. Evelyn, ever the poised socialite, could do nothing but stare at me, her perfect composure slipping further as the truth slowly unfolded. Ryan, however, didn't speak. He just sat there, frozen, his gaze flicking back and forth between me and the others at the table. It was as if he were trying to decide whether to continue to play along with his family's narrative or acknowledge the truth that was staring him in the face. I pressed on, unwilling to let the moment pass. You didn't think I'd ever catch on, did you? You thought I was just some naive woman who would walk away from everything I've worked for. But I'm not Clara. I'm not going to disappear quietly into the night and let you bury me with legal battles and empty promises. The mention of Clara caused a shift in the room. Ryan's eyes darted nervously to his parents, who had both grown rigid in their seats. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she lifted her wineglass to her lips, her usual icy composure melting under the weight of my words. Richard, ever the professional, simply gripped his glass tighter, his lips pressing into a thin line. I could feel the tension in the air, the unsaid accusations that were slowly coming to light. The truth was out now, and I was in control. I had a backup plan, a strategy, and most importantly, the evidence that would bring their world crumbling down. Ryan leaned forward slightly, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah, he began, his tone low and strained. This isn't the place for this. I didn't flinch. Actually, Ryan, this is exactly the place you chose. You wanted an audience, didn't you? Well, now you've got one. Let's talk about everything you've been hiding. Let's talk about how you and your family have been using your so-called charitable foundation as a cover for embezzlement, for fraud. Let's talk about how you plan to use it for medical experiments on children in developing countries. The waiter, who had been hovering on the sidelines, visibly retreated, sensing the storm that was brewing at the table. Other patrons in the restaurant had begun to notice the escalating tension. A murmur ran through the room. But I didn't care. I was beyond caring about what anyone thought. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about exposing the truth, about finally putting an end to their manipulation, to their lies. For the first time, I felt truly free. I wasn't just fighting for my career, my independence. I was fighting for something much more profound, the right to be who I was without hiding behind anyone's expectations. And as I sat there, under the weight of their scrutiny, I knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. Ryan's eyes were locked on me, his face pale, as though the world was closing in around him. His grip on his wineglass tightened, his knuckles growing white under the pressure. His parents were visibly rattled, the air between us thick with the weight of truths long buried. Evelyn's composed exterior had finally cracked. And even Richard, the esteemed doctor with decades of professional experience, looked unsure of himself for the first time in years. But none of it mattered. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to back down. I had expected Ryan to argue, to try and defend his family as he had done so many times before. But instead, he just sat there, utterly still, his gaze flickering between me and his parents. The silence stretched, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I had married, the man who once believed in integrity, who valued truth over everything else. But that man was a distant memory now, buried beneath layers of family loyalty and the relentless pressure of maintaining their legacy. Sarah, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. Why didn't you come to me with this sooner? It was a question I had been dreading. But in truth, it wasn't about coming to him sooner. It was about him choosing to ignore the signs, to turn a blind eye to the corruption that was festering within his family. He had known. He had to have known. And yet, he had chosen to remain silent, to allow the lies to continue, simply because they benefited him, just as they had always benefited his family. I met his gaze, my heart heavy with the weight of what I was about to say. Because every time I tried to talk to you about the foundation, you shut me down. Every time I tried to bring up my concerns, you pulled away. You became someone else. Someone who valued your family's image more than your own principles. His face darkened at my words, and I saw the flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, pass across his expression. It was as though he was finally beginning to process the enormity of what had been happening under his nose. But it was too late for apologies. Too late to pretend like he hadn't been complicit in all of it. I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady but resolute. I know everything, Ryan. I know about the irregularities in your foundation's financial records. I know about the millions of dollars funneled through shell companies. I know about the so-called educational initiatives that were nothing more than a cover for illegal medical experiments. I know because I've been investigating it for months, long before you even asked me to look into it. And I've seen what you've been doing to hide it all. The words hung in the air, heavy with the gravity of the accusations I was making. Ryan was shaking now, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and disbelief. His family, too, was in shock, their perfect world crumbling before their eyes. But I didn't care. I had nothing left to lose. You're a brilliant programmer, Ryan, I continued, my voice gaining strength. You've always been. But somewhere along the way, you stopped using your skills to do good. You stopped using your abilities to protect people and instead chose to protect your family's wealth, their reputation, their lies. Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. I could see the conflict within him, the struggle between the man he once was and the man he had become. But it was too late for him to make excuses. Too late for him to apologize for the years of manipulation, of trying to force me into a life I didn't want. A life I had fought to escape when I first met him at MIT. And then I dropped the final bombshell. Do you really think you're the first person to try to threaten this family? Do you think you're the first person to try to expose them? Because you're not. But I will be the last. The tension at the table was palpable. The waiters had stopped delivering food, sensing that something far more important was happening. Every single eye in the restaurant seemed to be focused on our table now, drawn in by the drama unfolding in front of them. But I didn't care. I wasn't doing this for the spectacle. I was doing this to finally take control of my own destiny. Lauren didn't disappear because she was weak, I said, my voice quieter now, but no less forceful. She disappeared because your family made sure she had no other choice. You ruined her, and now you're trying to do the same to me. Evelyn's face flushed with a mixture of shame and anger, and Richard shot her a look that was meant to silence her. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. Ryan finally spoke, his voice trembling with disbelief. Sarah, you can't be serious. You're threatening to destroy everything we've built? I stood up slowly, my movements measured and deliberate. No, Ryan, I said, my eyes meeting his. I'm not destroying anything. You are. Your family is. All I'm doing is exposing the truth that you've been hiding for years. The room fell silent as the reality of the situation settled in. The family that had once seemed untouchable, unshakable, was now exposed for what they truly were, corrupt, manipulative, and willing to sacrifice anything and anyone to protect their wealth and status. And I was done being a part of that world. Your legacy is built on lies. Ryan, I said softly, my voice trembling slightly, but I'm not going to be part of it anymore. The silence that hung in the air felt suffocating. It was as though time itself had paused. holding its breath in anticipation of what would come next. Ryan sat there, his face a mixture of disbelief, fear, and something deeper, regret. Maybe. I could see him wrestling with himself, with his family's expectations and the weight of the truth that had just been thrust in front of him. For so long, Ryan had been the dutiful son, the obedient heir to the Donovan family legacy. He had been groomed for this life, trained to uphold their reputation, to protect their wealth and power. But now, as the consequences of his family's actions unfolded before him, I could see the cracks in his armor, the guilt, the shame, and the realization that his entire world had been built on lies and manipulation were beginning to consume him. I stood there, my heart heavy with a mixture of sadness and anger. I had loved this man once. Loved him for the brilliant, idealistic person he used to be, the man who once believed in doing what was right, even when it was hard. But that man had been buried under years of family pressure, under the weight of expectations that had never been mine to carry. Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but the words seemed to get stuck in his throat. He couldn't even look me in the eye. His gaze was fixed on the table, his hands trembling as he fidgeted with the silverware. It was as though he were trying to figure out what to do next. How to fix everything that had been broken. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" It was a question that cut straight to the heart of everything. What did I want from him? I had no idea anymore. Part of me still wanted the man I had fallen in love with, the man who had once stood by my side, who had supported my dreams and ambitions. But another part of me knew that he was gone. The man sitting before me now was someone else. Someone I didn't recognize. The decision he was about to make would shape not just his future, but mine as well. "I want you to choose," I said, my voice firm, despite the emotions swirling inside me. "I want you to choose who you are. Ryan, are you the man who believes in truth and integrity? Or are you going to continue to hide behind your family's lies and help them destroy everything they've built? Even if it means sacrificing your own values?" Ryan's eyes finally met mine, and for the briefest moment, I saw a flicker of the man I once knew. But it was fleeting, like a shadow in the dark. He looked away again, his face pale and drawn. "I don't know if I can do this," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You have to," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You have to choose, Ryan. You can't keep living in the shadows. You can't keep running from the truth. The foundation, the company, the family, it's all built on deception. And if you keep protecting them, you're just as guilty as they are." I could see the battle within him, the pull of family loyalty fighting against the pull of what was right. The truth had always been clear to me, at least in the sense that I knew what I had to do. But for Ryan, the lines had always been blurred. The pressure from his family, the weight of their expectations, had kept him trapped in a life that no longer felt true to him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ryan stood up. He ran a hand through his hair, his gaze lingering on the table before slowly meeting my eyes. There was a vulnerability in his expression, something raw and exposed that I hadn't seen in years. "I can't keep living like this," he said, his voice steady but full of pain. "I can't keep protecting them. I can't protect a legacy that's built on lies." It was the answer I had been waiting for, the moment I had hoped would come, even when I doubted it would. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to feel a sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, there was still hope for us. Maybe there was still a chance for us to rebuild, together. "We can't undo what's been done," I said softly, "but we can stop it from going any further. We can take them down. Ryan, we can expose everything, and we can make sure that the people they've hurt get the justice they deserve." Ryan nodded, his eyes filled with a new sense of determination. "I'll help you," he said quietly. "I'll help you expose them. I'll help you make it right." It was the first time in months that I truly believed that Ryan might be able to reclaim the man I had fallen in love with. But I knew that this would be the beginning of a much harder journey. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, with obstacles that would test both of us. But in that moment, I knew that I wasn't facing it alone. As we left the restaurant, the weight of the evening's events still hung heavy in the air. But there was also something else, something that felt like a new beginning. Ryan had made his choice. And now, together, we would fight to take down the Donovan family empire, to expose the corruption, and to build something better in its place. The truth had come out. And now the real work would begin. The night air outside Le Chardon was cold, sharp, and crisp as we stepped out of the restaurant. My heels clicked against the pavement, echoing in the silence that enveloped us. Ryan walked beside me, his movements stiff, his face still pale from the weight of the decision he had just made. The weight of everything was pressing down on us, on him, on me, on the future we were about to face. But in that moment, I felt something shift, a subtle change in the air. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive force of his family's control anymore. It was the quiet strength of a new beginning. I turned to Ryan, my heart aching for the man who had once been my partner. The man I had stood beside when we first built our dreams together. I still saw glimpses of him in the man walking next to me. But I also saw a deep uncertainty, a man grappling with the reality of his past choices. "You made the right choice," I said softly, my voice barely a whisper. Ryan didn't respond immediately. He simply nodded, his eyes distant, as if he were already deep in thought, processing everything that had happened, everything that was to come. We both knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. Exposing his family's corruption, dismantling their empire, would not come without cost. There would be legal battles, threats, and public scrutiny. The Donovans were powerful, and they would not go down without a fight. But what I had come to realize in that moment, what I had come to understand, was that it wasn't just about fighting for the truth. It was about reclaiming our lives. It was about finding the courage to build something new. Something we could both believe in. Something that wasn't shaped by greed, by manipulation, or by fear. Ryan's voice broke the silence. "I keep thinking about everything we've lost. The foundation, my family's legacy, the company. How did it all get so twisted?" I could hear the sorrow in his voice. The regret that he had carried for so long, buried under the weight of his family's expectations. He had always believed in the power of family, in the importance of maintaining appearances, of doing whatever it took to protect the people he loved. But now, that very love had become a burden, a trap that had threatened to suffocate him, to strip him of everything that had once mattered. I reached out and placed my hand on his arm, offering a silent comfort. "It didn't happen overnight," I said quietly. "It was slow, little by little. They shaped you into someone else. Someone you didn't recognize. But you're finding your way back now. Ryan, you're remembering who you really are." He looked at me then, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you, Sarah, without you pushing me to see the truth." His words stung, but they also warmed me in a way that I hadn't expected. Because the truth was, I had needed him to remember who he was. Too, I had needed him to find his way back to the person who once believed in something greater than money, than status, than power. The person who had helped me through so many late nights coding. Who had celebrated my achievements. Who had seen me as an equal, not as an accessory to his success. "We're not done yet," I said, my voice firm. "There's still a long road ahead. But we'll face it together. Ryan, no more secrets, no more lies. We'll rebuild. We'll make things right." As we walked toward the car, I couldn't help but feel a sense of clarity, a sense that, for the first time in months, we were moving forward, not backward. Ryan had chosen the truth. And while there would be consequences for his family's actions, there was also hope. Hope for redemption. Hope for change. Hope for a future built on integrity, rather than deceit. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. We knew that, but together, we had the power to rebuild. To tear down the walls of a crumbling legacy and create something new. Something that honored the ideals we both believed in. Something that would make a difference. Ryan opened the car door for me, his hand lingering on mine for a brief moment. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic revelation, just the quiet promise that we would face whatever came next, side by side. And as the car pulled away, I found myself looking out at the city skyline, feeling a sense of peace settle over me for the first time in a long time. We had chosen the right path. The truth was out, and now it was time to rebuild. And no matter what happened, We would do it with honesty, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what was right. Together, as we moved forward, the weight of everything we had uncovered didn't feel like a burden anymore, it felt like liberation. The battles were far from over, but there was a sense of purpose that had emerged from the ruins of the Donovan family's empire. Together, Ryan and I were not just facing the fallout of exposing their crimes, we were beginning to rebuild a life founded on truth, transparency, and integrity. The road ahead was daunting. There would be legal challenges, public scrutiny, and endless attempts by the Donovans to salvage their reputation. But none of that could silence the truth we now held in our hands. We had the power to change not only our lives but the lives of so many others who had been harmed by their deceit. And for the first time in months, I felt the stirrings of hope. We were going to make things right. We were going to take down the facade and build something real, a foundation of justice. Not just for us, but for all those who had suffered in silence. We would use the very skills that had once been our passion to protect and empower others. As the months passed, Ryan and I worked side by side, channeling everything we had into making sure the truth was heard, that justice was served, and that no one else would have to endure what we had. We were no longer bound by the past. We were free to create the future we deserved. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you want to hear more life stories and witness how truth, love, and redemption can change lives, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for new videos.